Tom Brady, Kobe, Michael, Tiger Woods. You just pick the best that there's ever been at this game. Those guys, they have a code. They don't blame their caddy. They don't blame their coach. They don't blame their teammates. They go work on themselves.
The sales team is zero difference. Oh, the tech is broken. Oh, the data's not good. Oh, the leads aren't good. Guys, shut the fuck up. Do your job and figure out a way. Control what you can control. Stop complaining. Life's going to hand you these types of things. This team is for winners. If you want to win, you will find a way to win.
Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believe me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I'm making look easy.
What is up, ladies and gents? Hope you are ready for this delicious audio snack. Welcome back to the Best Damn Agency Podcast. The unscripted, unfiltered conversation about all things digital agency ownership, life, and of course, agency sales. I am the host, at least for now, of this show. Joey might revoke those rights after that intro, but I'm JJ Russell. I'm the host of the show. Joey Gilkey, my number one fan and critic, also my partner in crime, joining me as always. Joey, what's up, dude?
Hey, man. That was a little weird. So did you say the audio
didn't
snack?
Like the show? Yeah, being a delicious audio snack for their ears.
Whatever, dude. Call it whatever you want.
Well, I can call myself whatever I want because it's 2023. So this show can definitely be whatever.
An animate object can be for sure whatever they want.
And this show is still deciding its gender.
It is.
Which?
And it will stay that way because we have that right.
Of course. So my kids go to private school. Our circle is relatively small, but we love our neighbors. And again, I will hang out with just about anybody.
Your neighbors are all
not. Yeah. And
straight.
And some of them listen to the show. Not true.
Oh, you have some gay friends?
But
or you have some married to heterosexual marriages, but there's a closet gay in there, or what?
All right. We're getting too specific here because I've got neighbors that listen to the show, Joey. We can't out them figuratively and literally on the show.
We'll have them come to me with a pitchfork. Come down and knock.
So, what's interesting is just the exposure that some of my kids' friends in the neighborhood have is really interesting. So we've got a little sixth grader that ran over yesterday and said something about I identify as a woman so I can be a part of this group or something like that. And I'm like, whoa. It's really interesting.
It's a girl?
No.
Oh, it's a boy.
Yes. Who
got
was
it.
Joking, but that is part of, it's so accessible to him as an idea that he can just throw it out there almost as a joke. And I'm like, man, that's...
And contextually it makes sense.
Yes. Man, it's kind of crazy and scary, but...
It is scary.
Whatever.
I think it's the part that scares me the most, having a young kid and soon to be kids, is not so much there's some crazies out there, and it's easy to get away from the crazies, right?
Yep.
They're obvious. They usually have a certain tint hair. It's obvious. Or they're of a certain gender, a certain age, and they're angry and lonely. Then you also know that they probably fall into a certain category, or they're in education, right? So any of those three categories are usually pretty solid to slap a label with almost 100% certainty. But the part that's the hardest is your kid's going to have friends, and your kids' friends are going to have siblings who are older, and even there's a totally off. This is totally contextual to this conversation, but a little off the rails. So there's a church in Atlanta where they had a whole series in June called Delivered, which is all about folks who struggled with homosexuality or other sexual preferences, and they've been delivered from their sexual stuff, right?
Okay.
Whether it be homosexual or heterosexual, sex addictions or whatever it might be. And it was weird. So I've seen this pastor before, Miles Rutherford, I think his name is. And I was for some reason, he just popped up into my Instagram feed. And the guy who was speaking on stage was a guy that I was in 7th and 8th grade, best friends with.
Wild.
And so come to find out, he was closet gay. And the reason he got there was because he would go over to his friend's house and his older brother would sexually molest him. And so
Wow.
it's like,
That's
and it's
sad,
like normal
man. That's
shit,
crazy.
right? And he didn't really know that it was bad until he figured out that it was bad later on. And so, and that stuff happens a lot from what I've heard.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's like my kids want to start having sleepovers, and I don't know, man. Being a
We're
parent's
very
hard.
selective. We just want to be the cool farm and house that people want to send their kids
Everybody
to.
comes to. Yep. Same.
Yeah, we want to be the destination
Same.
so that my kid's not a weirdo. But we're very guarded. Like we're very selective with babysitters. If we don't know you and you're a referral, we'll do a background check on our babysitters.
It's cool.
And then, so that, and then obviously he's gonna be homeschooled. Their kids will be homeschooled, or
Well,
do
it's-
co-op school.
I think that there are not parents are not protective enough of their kids, and I cannot tell if it is them being lazy or them just being uninformed. I don't know, but I've
Both.
got
I think
my
it's
kids
ignorant
have
and
friends.
too lazy to become educated.
My kids have friends who have access to everything, the World Wide Web at age 8, and I'm like,
Which is wild.
I
to
don't
me.
know. I just know what I was.
That's a
doing.
level of ignorance that I just don't understand. Like like I know.
All right,
dude.
go.
Time out, real quick, before you go on, bro.
Please.
Do you remember LimeWire,
Oh yeah,
bro? Do you remember what you could get into using LimeWire when you were 11 or 12 years old? I did it, and LimeWire was hard as shit, right? Like to actually go find it. And you had to download it on your actual desktop and then watch it, and
it
then
was
delete it so your parents
guaranteed
wouldn't
to
find it.
nuke. It was guaranteed to nuke your
Yeah.
entire hard
Lots
drive.
of viruses. And but like we were doing it at that age when it was way harder, and now you have it literally on just free, easy websites that they can go on to.
On
Don't
your
have to
cell
pay
phone
anything. There's
at
no
age
cell phone.
8. Yep.
It's wild.
All right. On that note, I'm gonna grab a drink.
Go for it.
This is exciting. So I missed out. So I went to the old Buffalo Trace Distillery. So I drove out there early in the morning, but I learned, and it makes me feel naive because I am a Kentucky native. I am now. I'm a Louisville citizen. So I live like within 100 miles of all the best distilleries in the world, arguably. But I learned that at Buffalo Trace, you have to get there at like 7:30, prop up a lawn chair, get in line. There's like 500 people, and they sell everything at MSRP, and you can get access to E.H. Taylor. You can get access to Eagle Rare. They have Blanton's occasionally, and this time they had Weller Special Reserve, which it's funny. I was kind of bummed about it because I really wanted a bottle of Blanton's, but I will not complain about a $30 bottle of Weller Special Reserve.
Weller's so good.
And I got this cool little Weller cup.
The original weeded. That's cool.
Rocking all my stuff right now. Yeah.
Way to go.
Yeah. All right. So
you went there. Did you get there at 7:30?
I got there at 8:30, so I was like in the back of the line.
It's okay. Got something.
I found my Misogi.
Oh, really? Okay.
So to those who...
Is it in line with the one that you've been talking kind of about?
Yeah.
All right.
Yep.
So reinform.
Misogi,
I know we talked about it twice now, but what is it? Just a refresher.
Yeah. It's basically this just like crazy, semi-impossible physical feat, something that you set out to do that you're almost certain is like a 50-50 chance of failure. And it's the whole idea of stretching your mental limits by doing something that you feel like you would be physically incapable of doing. And so for you, I think yours is like climbing a mountain, doing 1,000 thrusters at the top of the mountain and coming back down. We came up with that when we talked about it with Chris last
with
week.
a rucksack.
With a rucksack, a 50-pound rucksack, which is no joke. So mine, I have gotten into rucking, and two of the guys that I've been rucking with have done this 24-hour event at Fort Bragg.
Yep.
So it's led by the Marines. It's their cadre that are like putting you basically through whatever they can dream up. And so they advertise it as 40 miles in 24 hours with a rucksack with all your gear and a 35-pound ruck plate. But what I've learned is like, that's what they tell you, but you could show up and they could say, hey, for the first 5 hours, you're going to swim laps in this pool and we're going to spray you with a hose. Like, you just have no idea what's coming.
If swimming's involved for that long, I would literally die.
So that is the 24-hour event. They do one called the Heavy Tough Light, where you do 3 events over the course of 2 days. You do a 24-hour event, sleep for 4 hours, do an 18-hour event, get no rest, and then do a 12-hour event.
Wow. So you're going to do it?
That is, I needed it to be published. Like, they've not announced the dates, but they said probably March. And so that is my Misogi that I am eyeballing.
That's the question I had about the Misogi, though, because, like, how much training do you do to, like, is it supposed to be literally impossible right this second, and you try to work yourself to it being 50% possible, or is it like you just pick something that's 50% possible and you go do it?
We will have to do research and get back to the people and ourselves.
Like,
we'll see.
I'm not like a huge rules guy, but like I just want to do it kind of right, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to cheat it. You don't want to do a Misogi and cheat it. Find out later that you did the whole thing wrong.
The thing is I could probably do mine. It will just take me 3 days. Like,
yeah.
I thought about it. I'm like, I probably need to bring camping shit because I don't think the hike will be that long. Like, I'll get there in probably 6 hours or something, or 4 hours. But 1,000 thrusters with 50 pounds is no freaking joke. Well, you did the math.
I think
it was like if I basically did 15 per minute,
yep,
it'll take me 2 hours. Like, your boy's
Something
not doing 15 for 2 hours straight every minute.
You should set a time limit on yourself.
Well, that's what I was thinking about doing was maybe putting a time limit, because that would actually, I could train for it, and then I could just set my time limit based on where I think I'm at.
12 hours.
Yeah. I can't sleep up
Something
there,
like
basically.
Something
I can
like
get attacked by a mountain lion.
I've done stuff where I've run mountain ridges by myself, and the whole time I'm looking behind me because I'm terrified that something is chasing me.
You know, the rule is, though, or the saying is, if you see a mountain lion, it's too late.
Yeah, that's most likely true, except, and I think I've shared the story on the pod before, so I won't tell the whole thing. I know a guy who killed a panther that tried to kill him.
Is it a baby panther, though?
No, this dude in Africa, full-grown panther, jumped off a roof. It was stalking him, and the dude choked it out while it was going for his neck and kept all the claws and put them on a necklace.
That's badass. Damn.
Yeah, so if you get attacked by a mountain lion, there is the small percentage chance that could be you. Could be you.
Yes.
All right, let's talk sales. We're kind of pressed up against a timeline here. We got like 30 minutes, but I want to really dive into some sales stuff. Before we do, I feel like the Palm Springs retreat conversation's getting some traction. And so
we're running out of spots. That's
anybody,
why it's getting traction.
That's what I'm saying. So we've got 25 members committed. We've got a few on the fence. We've got a handful of guests committed. We are easily, with our speakers and everything, we're going to hit 35 or 40 people. That's our max capacity. And so we're starting to have to limit our spots. We've got 2 guests who are committed already. And so if that's you, if you want a spot to our semi-annual retreat for the best damn agency mastermind, this is 7 and 8 figure entrepreneurs. You're going to be in the room with people who are playing at or above the level that you're playing at, solving problems that you're trying to solve or have already solved them. We'll have a $100 million agency CEO who bootstrapped to that point in the room, doing trainings, sitting around tables, eating, talking, workshopping with us. It's going to be a huge value add.
So, be there, by the way.
He's amazing. If you've heard us talk about this mastermind and you're like, man, I think this could be the thing that puts me over the hump, or like kind of gets me to the next level, but I'm not ready to make a commitment to a community like that, this retreat is the best opportunity for you to really feel it out, get a bunch of value, and figure out if this could be the next right step for you. So go to bestdamnmastermind.com/retreats and fill out the interest form. We can have a conversation.
You know what you should do? Right now, You're going to cut to Greg's testimony of his first month experience.
Oh, yeah. Boom. Here's Greg talking about how good we are.
I've been around the block long enough to be a part of a lot of different groups. And I mean, I've only been a part of this group for 3-4 weeks, I guess, 4 weeks. It's the most active, resourceful, and effective group I've ever been a part of. So hats off to what you guys created, Joey and Jojo, because I think it's effective, and I'm very excited to be part of it.
Love it. Sweet. That's great, Joey. All right, so we are doing a bunch of these outbound R&D projects. So Apex Revenue, the sales consulting company that you also own, fractional sales leadership. Our entry point with any new client is this outbound R&D offer where we basically help them define their ICP. We build out their list. We segment their list. We call and score their list. Then we get 100 completions for them. We're making dials for them. We're basically going to market for them to validate whether or not outbound works for them. So huge value. But we've run into this issue where we've got people that they have 4 or 5 industries they already serve. Then they have 1 or 2 industries that they're thinking about breaking into. And we have to help them decide which is the best place for you to start with this outbound R&D project. So if you're thinking for how somebody should select the industry they want to target with outbound, if this is something they're doing for the first time, how should they think through that process of selecting that industry?
Yeah, I think that, well, with outbound, I think that any industry can work. It's just going to drastically change how you, like I give the analogy of strategy, like sales strategy comes, it's almost like, do I take a dart into a 30-yard archery range and try to sling this 4-inch dart, 30 yards down?
Yep.
Probably not. Would I take a compound bow into a bar and shoot at a dartboard? No, I wouldn't. And so it's really knowing, like, okay, what's the board? How far is the board? What weapon can I use? And what are the rules? And so I think it's not so much like you can shoot, like there are better industries for outbound than others. I think there are better strategies for different industries to get outbound right. That being said, if you're looking at like the traditional one that's far more scalable and is the one that we tend to like to build around, then I tend to look at a couple things. One is, how valuable is your offer? Both in monetarily, how valuable is it to your organization, but 2, how valuable is it to the market that you serve? Is it unique?
Yep.
Is there something uniquely set apart about your offer? So that's one thing. Secondly is, how big is that market? So I just want to understand, what is my total addressable market? There's a layer below total addressable market. And I think that is like the total accessible market. So addressable is all people who could potentially buy from you. Accessible, I think, is more about, can I even get the information I need to go after these people effectively? Yep. And that's where I think there's a lot of issues, right? So like an example is, there's a lot of medical practices and healthcare organizations out there, but accessibility is very challenging. And so if that is the case, then you know that your approach is probably going to have to take into consideration the accessibility. If the market is 100,000 accounts that I can go after, that's an amazing TAM, right, that I can sell to. But accessibility is a fraction of that, down at like 5% that I can actually get in front of. Well, truly, I need to create my strategy around the 5%, at least for like scalable selling. The other 95%, you might need to take a radically different approach. But if we're looking at like cold email, cold phone, cold social, and doing a little bit of volume, a little bit of account-based selling to all those, then I think that you probably have to look at, is the total accessible market big enough? And lastly is, who am I selling to in those accounts? Like, who's the actual persona that I'm selling to? And are they even accessible? Going back to medical practices, if you're selling to a very small medical practice and the one of the practicing doctors is also the owner of the company, he's likely practicing all day long. It's what he loves to do and enjoys doing. And the only person that's going to be able to field your call at a small medical practice is an office manager who doesn't know jack shit about business. They're just basically a glorified assistant. And so you're going to call them. They're going to try to relay your message to the doctor who doesn't give a shit. And the message is going to be pretty wonky. And you're never going to get the person that you want on the phone, at least not at a predictable or substantial rate. So, yeah.
That's really good. I know. Yeah, there's those things. If you're trying to do outbound for the first time, and you do not have a strategy or a process for how you can test and validate message market fit, and then this kind of industry accessibility is what you were talking about, your accessible TAM, I guess. Yeah, accessible market. If you're not able to explore those things and confirm them, then you are building a machine in vain. Right. And so I was actually talking to my dad about this, like 2 years ago. We were more or less building the machine and then crafting the strategy. And where that worked fine is 2 years ago.
Services-led, strategy supported.
Yeah, but you could sell, right? People were so flush with cash that you could just about sell to anybody. And so as long as you had a working sales operation built on solid processes and principles, you could go sell. So if you hired the people, you could just figure it out. Now, we started running into a brick wall where we didn't have message market fit. The strategy wasn't working, and we had to iterate over and over again, and we would finally get it right, but we had to iterate. Now it's like, no, you have to establish that first. I talked to a fractional sales leader that one of our clients in the mastermind just brought on, and they were talking about all the things they're going to start building. They're going to start building the tech and building the process and building all this stuff out. But I'm like, well, do you know that you can even reach your audience via outbound, right? And so like, I don't think a lot of people are thinking about establishing that first.
Yes.
So there's not really a question in there. I just think it's
that's
a
why
paradigm shift.
It's entirely why I talk about message market fit strategy and process before sales hiring, sales leadership, and sales technology, right? It's basically find out the context before you go build the thing instead of go build a thing and then figure out the context. It's no different than like product development, like in the software world. It's like most people suck in Silicon Valley because they go build the thing and they go try to find the customers to then sell the thing to, whereas it should be, where are the customers? How do they spend their time? What are the pain points? And are they willing to spend money on something and then go build the thing based off of that? It's no different than that. It's almost like there's only a handful of principles in life and you can just apply them infinitely across a bunch of different areas and categories.
I think that is probably true.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so kind of a subsection of this conversation, we've talked about the importance of the list. And so at one point in a training you were just doing, you said the list is the strategy. And it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I think you were being honest about it. Like, if you have a shitty list, then you're doomed to fail. And so talk about the list is the strategy and how should people be making sure they've got one that is going to point them in the right direction.
Sure. I'm not the originator of the quote. It's actually Ryan Racert over at Phone Ready Leads. But I mean, it's kind of what we're talking about, right? If the market is not accessible and you have a small list or whatever, then that's one thing. If the market doesn't answer the phone, that's another thing. If the data is wrong, it doesn't matter what your strategy even is, right? And so you can say, hey, here's an amazing script and here's our opening line and here's our, like we're now adopting more of like a Josh Braun, how framework for cold calling right now. And thanks to Ryan and thanks to Josh. But that could be amazing. You'd have an amazing script, but if you physically can't get someone on the phone or can't get enough people on the phone because the data is so bad, or because you don't segment data through Phone Ready Leads like we are now suggesting everyone do. If you don't do that, then you will be calling 100 people. You will get 30% bad data, right? So 30 of those 100 every day are wasted. And then of the 70 that are remaining, you're going to get probably another 10 to 30% that are probably the wrong person, but they're not going to answer. And you don't know they're the wrong person, which means you're going to call them again, even though they're the wrong person. But you don't know that until you talk to them. And so you got to call them enough times until you can talk to them. So anyways, you're going to call 100 people. You're going to maybe talk to 4 to 10 of those 100. Yep. You're going to get a bunch of bad numbers. You're going to spend a bunch of time with gatekeepers. You're going to spend a bunch of time with directory trees. You're going to call people who are no longer at the company that you're calling on. And so if your list and your data is wrong and or bad and or off, you will find yourself in an extremely wasteful environment where it'll be challenging to get your number.
Let me add to that too, like being nimble. And so the way that Ryan and his team score these lists and come back and say, hey, these are the 35% that are phone ready. The phone is a viable channel. You will get them 85% of the time if you call 5 times. If they call 100 people and they do that in the first day or two or whatever with this list, or if we call 100 people with this list, we're going to talk to 30 to 40 of those people. We're going to have 30 or 40 conversations. And so rather than sending an SDR out to make 100 dials a day and have 5 conversations a day, and it's going to take you 2 weeks, 3 weeks to have 40, 50 conversations. We're doing that in a day or two. And so within a day or two of launching one of our recent projects, we knew, hey, we can get a hold of people 35% of the time. We make a dial, but we've got our data set that we're using is outdated for this industry. Yep. So we're getting a lot of people who are no longer at the company, but we knew that within 48 hours of starting the project.
Yep.
And so even if your data is bad, if you've scored it, you're going to know that it's bad in the first 48 hours, right? You're going to be able to make decisions a lot faster. So
yeah, and then you know I'm not going to pull my data like I did from that source or from that source at all. And if I do pull it from that source, I need to run it through a different source to clean it up a little bit.
Yep, it just makes you much more informed.
And that's for that's phone, that's email, that's every platform it applies. We talk a lot about the phone, but it's that if I'm emailing someone who's no longer at the company, then I'm probably going to get a higher bounce rate, or it's never going to get seen.
Cool. I was talking to my dad. I told you about this, but I was also talking to him about sales management. Just asking, like, hey, what are you guys looking for? How do you keep your thumb on top of salespeople? Yeah. And they've got, I hope I'm not outing them. I'm sure that this has been shared broadly, right? But they've got this this platform or this like rundown they call Magic Moments, which I kind of hate, but whatever, for sales management. And it's all about like these key inflection points in a new sales rep's ramping. And so
sounds
you
a
got
lot
their
like
onboarding process. Yeah, same.
Had a lot of magic moments with some women.
Pretty sure you told us that you had one in a movie theater.
No, it wasn't. It was actually in a school auditorium. A school auditorium during a play.
We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that. So magic moments, onboarding, one-on-ones, ride-alongs, and like reviews, right? And so it comes back to a lot of these management highlights or moments. But my dad said that he will sit with sales leaders and do breakdowns and say, hey, you've got a team of 9. They get X amount of days in the field. For your team, they have a total of 144 days in the field each month across like each person, right? 144 days spent in the field. You ride along with 3 each week. So you get 12 days. 12 of the 144 you get with your sales reps in the field. These are all outside sales reps. So what are you doing for the other 132 days? Or what are they doing for the other 132 days that you're not with them? And the conversation comes back to accountability. It comes back to how well you've trained and equipped them. It comes back to the expectations that you've set. And it made me think about something that you said recently, which is people will mold to the jar you give them. Is that how you say it again?
Yeah, it's basically
stuff,
like
right?
you put water in a jar of some sort. Doesn't matter the shape. It takes the shape of the jar.
So and we talked a little bit about this before with mindset, but like you cannot watch your sales reps. Even if you can watch call recordings and stuff, your sales management, your sales leadership, they cannot watch every call, every day, every hour. They just can't be there. And so how do you hold your sales team to a high standard? How do you make sure they're doing the right things when you're not there the majority of the time?
Dude, what's funny is this is the cool thing about this podcast is I could probably listen back on the past 2 or 3 years that we've been doing it, and I can kind of see even my evolution and how I think about different topics. What's funny is how I used to be, I probably got away from slightly, and then I've kind of gone back in, then got away from slightly, then gone back in. But I've kind of got to the point now where it's like, assuming you have your sales management, leadership, training, framework in place, the most important thing you can do, so there's 2 parts. One, I've talked about before, like cultivating an environment where reps can develop ambition, intuition, and discernment, right? We talk about that. You can't create those things, but you can create an environment for those things to be self-created by the rep. But I think ultimately it really does come down to the culture that you provide, right? And I think that we have to get back to a culture where there is an extremely high standard and a code that we want to set for our sales reps. And yes, it's about the activities. It's the one thing I'd push back on like the ADP model or like tech systems where I came from, corporate levels, they get so ingrained in the sales activity. And it does lift the ship ultimately, and they're at the point of just needing to scale. But for a lot of smaller organizations where they don't have, 9 sales reps in this one office out of 130 offices, you really need people to produce. And so I think that it really does come down to, like, you just got to set an extremely high standard and let them know that it is a standard, not a goal. And that's something that's really interesting. I sat down with Scott in St. Louis, Scott Scully of Abstract, and he has a massive sales team. And he and I align on so many different things, and he has a lot to offer me. I think I have a lot to offer him and his team, and so we have a really good relationship there. But one thing that he talked about was just that, or his CRO, Jeff, mentioned to Scott, was that he thinks that his sales reps think that there is like a goal and then a bar that he'll settle for. He said, no. My goal is my standard. It's not a goal like this theoretical, if you hit it, yay, rah, rah, pizza party, right? It's like, that's my standard. And so, like, the 4-minute mile thing, like, no one thinks they can hit the 4-minute mile until you tell them they have to hit the 4-minute mile. If I sit down with the sales rep and I say, hey, your job is dependent on you hitting this, then his job is dependent on him hitting that. And so he was far more likely to go hit that seemingly impossible standard because you've put the urgency and the necessity behind it. And so I think we have to get back to all this wrapped up in a bow. I think we have to get back to, yes, have your frameworks, have your accountability, measure the things that we think matter, but ultimately create an environment where you're just setting really, really high standards and you don't waver from those standards.
I've heard you use the word code, and you talked about yours. You said, I live by a code, and you actually laid out what that is on the podcast. Mm-hmm. For a business, you don't hear that as much. You hear culture, you hear objectives and goals and those kind of things.
Core values.
How would you apply the idea of a code to a business and expectations, and how does that differ from the other words that you could substitute for that?
Yeah, culture is kind of like the environments you exist within, right? So it's almost like how you feel when you're in that environment is kind of how I look at culture. It's more of like a not theoretical, but like this ethereal feeling I get. Whereas I think that like a code is essentially, it's like it is the, I don't even know how to answer it the right way. I mean, it is what it is, right? A code it's the standard in which that we choose to live by. That if I don't live by this, I am not hitting what is expected of me and what is possible for me. And so, basically, I think you have to set a bar that is a bar of achievement and a bar of expectation, and you just can't settle for people who continuously miss the bar. Now, you're going to miss the bar at sales. At times, you'll miss the bar. But, I think I don't really know how to explain it. I know you're asking, and I appreciate the question. I just don't really have a good answer for it, other than like, I don't think it differs from like us personally having a code. It's like, what are your values? What are the standards you set for yourself? What are your non-negotiables? What are the things that you do no matter what, no matter how you feel, you wake up and you do the things? These are your default actions.
And your sales team, you're saying, aligns with leadership on what those commitments are.
Yes.
Yeah,
I mean, like when we had a much larger sales team at Sales Driven Agency, now Apex Revenue, like it was not uncommon that people would complain. It's like, oh, the tech is broken. Oh, the data is not good. Oh, the leads aren't good. It's like, I would have to parachute in sometimes and be like, guys, shut the fuck up. Do your job and figure out a way. Like there were multiple times, and there's very specific individuals who I had to have this conversation with and pull them aside. Like, dude, control what you can control. Stop complaining. Life's going to hand you these types of things. If you complain about it, you're not going to fix it. You're just going to feel worse about the situation. So this team is for winners. If you want to win, you will find a way to win. And so if you do that, the tech will eventually fix itself. The data will eventually fix itself. The lead quality was either bad and it's going to get better, or it was never bad and you're going to realize that. But when you set a code...
Here's what's so interesting is I'm hearing you say this, and I'm thinking about athletes. My brain goes there immediately all the time. And I think about Tom Brady and Kobe and Michael and Tiger Woods and whoever else, right? You just pick the best that there's ever been at this game, right? Mm-hmm. let's say Tiger Woods misses, he 3-putts a bunch at the Masters, or Kobe starts shooting 20%, from 3-point or whatever. Those guys, they have a code. I just watched this thing about the Redeem team, which is the 2008 Olympic basketball team, and they highlighted Kobe throughout the entire video, which is cool because it's like cool to see his legacy now that he's gone.
Yeah.
But they were like, this guy was a machine. We were getting back from the club at 5 a.m. and Kobe was getting up to go work out and go shoot free throws, and we had practice in 4 hours or whatever. He was an animal. But those guys don't blame their caddy. They don't blame their coach. They don't blame their teammates. They go work on themselves and try to live up to the standard
set the standard
for themselves.
I mean, fill in the blank. This is a football phrase most offensive coaches, coordinators, position coaches would say.
I didn't play offense, so I don't know.
It doesn't matter. You'll know it. If there's a receiver, if the ball touches your hands, fill in the blank. If the ball touches your hands, exactly, you should catch it. It's the standard. It's the code. It doesn't matter if the guy's on your back. It doesn't matter if the guy's pulling at your jersey. If the ball touches your hands, you catch it. And they're not saying that code based on your skill set. They're saying that code because that's what's required. Right? Whether you're good enough or not, you will either elevate to that code and that standard, which is I will catch the ball if it touches my hands, right? Or you won't, and you won't play. You won't be on the team. You'll lose your scholarship.
Yep.
You'll transfer out because you're not getting the opportunity, right? Like the sales team is zero difference to an athletic sports team.
Here's the conversation that not a lot of founders want to have, and it's one that I actually had with a guy at a sales call with today. So I meet this guy.
By the way, timeout. Catch the freaking ball. We had a position coach.
Sarver?
No, that was it was Rucker. Catch the freaking ball.
Was he the one that made y'all do push-ups for every drop?
He might have. I don't know. He was a weirdo.
Okay. All right, so the conversation not a lot of founders want to have is one that I had with a guy today who, it's interesting, most of the agency owners that we work with, the vast majority are founders. So they're CEOs and they're founders. This guy was a corporate attorney, specialized in M&A, went out and started his own business doing something else, and then started, getting in with this agency that had, 80-something employees, and they started talking about leadership, and a year later they brought him in to be the CEO. Right, so I think there's something unique about somebody who comes into the business as not the founder with more business savvy and experience, outside perspective, all those things. But the first thing he recognized when he came in is, I am only hiring all-stars and we don't have enough. And I would say Scott Scully, we've talked about him a lot, feels the same way. They have an A-player score. They have this thing that designates the top performers in the company. This is the level that you should be striving for and achieving on a regular basis. This is the code, right? And they hold them to that standard. And this guy recognized that, and he's like, hey, the first thing we need to do is get rid of the underperformers and bring in a whole bunch of top-tier talent. I think the company actually shrank from an employee headcount perspective, but they went out and hired a bunch of top-tier people. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like we work with a lot of smaller companies that don't have big enough sales teams to where I would do this. But if I was to walk into let's just say a 40-person sales floor, it would actually be my goal and my pleasure to let go of half of that team in the first month. I'm not kidding. Because Pareto principle will always prove itself out. That's probably being generous. I probably should cut 70% or 80%. But realistically, if you look across the board, there's a recent statistic that just came out. I forget if it was Gartner or someone else, but it's basically if you look at every company's pipeline across the entire ecosystem of sellers, I think it was literally to the T the Pareto principle playing out. It was basically saying that it was like 23% of reps were producing 82% of the revenue opportunities. 80-20 rule. And crazy. So if that's the case, like your job as a sales leader, as a CRO, as an owner of a company, of a smaller team, is you need to go in there and you need to create topsoil, right? New, fresh soil. And your goal is to take my top performers, my all-stars, if you will, my A and Bs, cut everyone else, and then make my A and Bs now my new A, B, C, D, E, F, G, et cetera, right? Like the goal is to make your top 20% now your average, right? And that's how you get better is you basically say, hey, we have, let's just say there's 10 reps, and there's 2 that produce 80% of the results. If I get rid of 5 of those 10, who are the lowest performing 5 and I'm left with the remaining 5, I should add 5 more to that team to now have 10 again. And I would like for my top 2 performers of the original cohort of 10 to now be like my B players on this current team. Right?
Yep.
And so that's how you create world-class sales teams, is you continue to topsoil and top fill talent, and you also prune the shit.
Why is it that CEOs are so reluctant, founders are so reluctant to take action on data like this? So we just had a mastermind call. We had a guy who's new to the group, great dude, said, hey, I just implemented EOS. Yep. I'm looking at these metrics. I'm recognizing gaps in my leadership team, people that are not meeting the expectations. If you're not consistently meeting expectations, like, you just shouldn't be there.
That's right.
Am I wrong?
No.
So no. It seems like, we've got other guys in the group who are they are ready to ruthlessly eliminate people that are not up to the task. And I think that they're probably the most successful and most profitable. 100%. But why is it that the majority of CEOs or founders, at least in our space, are unwilling to take action on the data even when they know the data is good, and says these people are not cutting it?
Ultimately, there's a couple different types of people there's some people who just are indebted to other people. They're just too nice, right? And so it's like, oh, this person's been here for 5 years. I mean, you're kind of nice, but I think you also understand when people aren't high performers. But I think I had a really good conversation with one of the guys in the mastermind. He's also an Apex revenue client, and he's talking about blowing up the bus, if you will, of his company, and which just sounds very terroristic now that I think about that phrase. But anyway, so he talked about employees he has that have been there for 5-6 years. He feels indebted to them, but they've just kind of lost the energy, and they're not that exciting. And you could bring in somebody with even less costs, who has more energy and excitement, and that would probably lift the team. And then you could kind of sense when he said it out loud, he realized I'm too nice,
Yep.
And I hope he cut them. I don't know if he has or not, but I'm sure he has. I think people are too nice. Or I think people are too fearful that they're not going to be able to find a replacement that's better, or that they're going to have a capacity issue because they're churning employees who can technically fulfill on work, albeit not great quality work. They're still there. Yep. My theory is and I just did this literally. I mean, I hired someone who I thought would be a great fit, and 3 weeks in, I fired him. It's because I just know. And I wanted to give him chances, and it just didn't work out, and it was a really easy decision to make.
Dude, but do you know who's better off for that decision? Because I know this person, and I know this. You're better off. That person's better off. Our clients are better off. Our team is better off. Every single person in the equation is better off because you let go of the person who wasn't going to do a good job.
That's right.
So it's I don't know, man. It's simple.
But I do think capacity is, I'd say, the most legitimate argument that people do make. It's still not a good one. Is, well, we're going to have capacity issues if we keep churning employees. Well, yeah, we'll get fucking better at hiring, and you won't have to in the future. But right now, you're laying in the bed that you made. And the bed you made is you hired the wrong people. You didn't train them right. You didn't have the right standard and code for people, and they didn't perform. And now you're looking at them like, hey, I should keep them on because we're going to have capacity issues. But you're going to have, even if you don't have capacity issues, you're going to have performance issues. And so pick your poison.
It is synonymous with sales and pipeline and churn and bad clients, right? So if you got a full pipeline, if you got a great hiring operation, you can afford to let go of bad clients, bad employees that are not up to the bar, up to the standard. So
100%.
It's good. All right. Let's end the sales conversation on this. You mentioned some of the things we're doing and testing out from a cold call script perspective with help. What makes a winning cold call script?
Well, one, getting the right person on the phone, that helps. Getting enough at bats helps. But, I mean, the one that I'll just go straight into it, Josh Braun's framework. I think he actually posted on LinkedIn recently. You could probably archive, look at his posts, but he posted his framework. It's basically the how framework. And so it's all about it's all about, honestly, it's knowing the pain point and knowing your customer so well. This is back to your very, very, very first question about like picking an industry for Outbound is like, if you have 5 or 6 industries that you're targeting and testing things against, you're never going to get to your answer very quickly. But if you know who you're going after, then you can speak specifically to their problems. And so like the how is all about like, hey, JJ, you know how you're pumping a bunch of money into sales department specifically. So right now we're calling on 50 to 500 employee facility services companies. So I know specifically that they spend a lot of money in sales and not as much in marketing. So I'm gonna press on that pain point. They spend a lot of money on sales. So you know how you spend a large portion of your growth budget on your sales department, and it's frustrating that when you put money in, the money doesn't come back out at a rapid rate or even at all. In some cases, and your sales department isn't producing. Well, at Apex, we do this, and this. You tell me to do, and then you finish it with a question, which I've always talked about. You finish the question, but that's part of the framework. Let me ask you, JJ, are you guys doing this, and this, or are you guys growing? I think right now we're testing. Are you guys growing pretty rapidly through your outbound sales, or is it predominantly through like your marketing, your digital, word of mouth, referrals, and so on? And they give you an answer, and then that pulls you down the cold call path to ask better questions and eventually get them onto a call. But that's the framework. It's really good.
How is a good lead for any.
It's a great lead. That's why Josh Brown's
very assumptive. Yeah, it's great. That's great. I mean, a lot of the cold calls we're making right now are much more like amorphous, like non-threatening in a way that I kind of like, right? So the script we're using right now is like, hey, I just want to make sure I'm reaching the right person. Like, hey, this is Ryan, or this is JJ from Apex Revenue. This is the first time that I've ever called you. Are you familiar with our company, right? So you're soliciting an answer. They tell you X, Y, and Z. Hey, just want to make sure that I'm reaching the right person. Is this so-and-so and so-and-so company? They give you an answer, right? And you literally are trying to book the meeting before they even know what you do, which I love.
100%.
Right? Like,
knowing they're not going to say
I know
yes.
I'm calling you. Yes.
Right? Because here's how it's positioned. And we're still doing that because we're still doing that with the how script. We're kind of combining the two. But like, the reason I'm calling is I wanted to see if it would make sense to set an introductory call with yourself and fill in the blank, Joey, our CEO, or this person at this company. Do you ever set aside time for stuff like that? And then inevitably they always go, well, what do you guys do? And then it's like, well, I'm glad you asked. Well, you know how, and then you go into you know how.
Yep.
Right? So that's kind of the whole framework.
Oh, that's dangerous. That's a deadly combination, man. I love it.
But here's a practical one for like a lot of folks who are listening who are probably like SEOs, right? So yours could basically, you could call in, a sales rep could call in and be like, hey, just wanted to, this is, Joey over at, let's use Simple Tiger because they're a client and a friend of ours. But, hey, this is Joey over at Simple Tiger. Did I catch you at a good time? Or actually, you know what a really good one is right now that we're testing as well is, I just heard today. I was like, man, that's so good. It's I was actually just wondering if you could help me out for a minute, right? And so they said, yeah, sure. Okay, great. Well, let me just real quick. The purpose for my call is I wanted to set an introductory call with you potentially and our CEO Jeremiah. Would you be interested in that conversation? And then, of course, they're not going to set that. They're going to say, well, I mean, what do you guys do? Oh, yeah, of course. So you know how companies typically, when they're hiring for like SEO, how to rank higher on Google, they talk to these agencies and they tell them it takes 6 months to get results. And you're always like, I don't want to wait 6 months. And are you even telling me the truth? And I've already spent a bunch of money. It's super frustrating. Well, here at Simple Tiger, and then you fill in the thing, right? And so
it's really good.
Yeah, it's a freaking baller script. I love it.
What's funny is I've heard a lot of call recordings with that script, and when you go, do you ever book a meeting like that? Will you ever book calls like that? And a lot of times, how smart they are in their reply. They're like, I mean, you haven't even told me what you do yet. What do you guys like? There's frustration, but they'll ask.
Totally.
Like, I mean, what do you guys do? And you're like, You know how.
Well, of
So
course.
good.
I mean, yeah, sure, I understand.
So good. Oh man.
But we're even.
Well, I hope
we're even.
somebody. Good.
We're even like putting some stuff in there with like, pauses and ums and uncertainty, like some of your tone there, just to kind of be a little bit more guard down. So it's interesting.
Really good. Somebody work on that script. Like build it out for yourself. Hand it to your sales team. But make sure you have a list that doesn't suck, because the list is the strategy. Credit to Ryan Reisert. If you want to go to Palm Springs, hit us up. It's going to be a baller trip. Again, I'll say it one more time. Best Damn Agency Mastermind /retreats. And then check us out on YouTube. The live recording is pretty fun. Last week's interview with Chris Dreyer was a lot of fun. There were some good visuals from that interview. And
for those of you guys listening,
always,
should we have an ongoing like monthly segment with Chris Dreyer? Because I think that would be a ton of fun.
Yeah, if you want to see an ongoing segment with Chris Dreyer, I don't even know how they tell us. Tell us in the comments
on YouTube.
Comment on YouTube, yeah. It's youtube.com/bestdamnagency. You can find us there. Just search that and you'll find us. But as always, appreciate your time and attention. It's valuable. I know that, and I hope that we added some value to you today. Joey, appreciate your time that you've given to the audience, to this podcast.
Yes,
and as always, we will see you next week for another episode of the Best Damn Agency Podcast. Peace.
Peace. Come to Palm Springs.
Whoa! Who knew I would make it this far? They hated, they never believed me. Yeah, I would never drop the ball. I know I make it look easy. Yeah.